Ian, hi.
Hello.
So you've been speaking with Chase. He was telling you all about trying to get to the CrossFit Games and how he's part of a team and they made it to regionals and what it took for him to get there and to compete at that level. You don't really have any desire or plans to go to the CrossFit Games, so you're kind of trying to change the conversation to your topic. How are you going to do that?
Well, when you're working on a team for any sort of task, it takes a lot of communication and a lot of coordination and a lot of just knowing each other and being able to know where you're going, know what your goals are. And that can be applied to athletics as well as creativity. If you look at one of the most beloved creative properties of all time, Star Wars, the amount of team and planning that goes into making a franchise like is pretty astounding. You have to have all these people making movies, which is a teamwork all of its own, and they have to interconnect that storytelling, books and comics and TV shows. So the creative teamwork necessary could very much be looked at with the same sort of eye as an athletics cooperative task.
Well, you don't sound convinced, but you've convinced me, so that's excellent. Excellent. On with the show.
Sometimes I just keep talking
until it clicks.
Until it clicks.
Okay, well, it has done. So let's begin.
Awesome.
Well, he's got a new guest, time to put him to the test. So hey, what's the topic? We don't know, cause he never does research for this show. His name is Jason, he wants to talk to you about a topic you love or something you do. No two topics are ever the same. That might sound impressive, but they're all pretty lame. A conversation with a conversation with a conversation with.
Hello, you're listening to A Conversation With. My name is Jason, and each week I'm joined by a guest, and we have a conversation on a topic of their choice. And this week I'm being joined by Ian from the podcast Hoth Topics. It's a Star Wars podcast, and as you will have heard, he's come to talk to me about Star Wars. So, hi Ian.
Hello, how are you, Jason?
I am... Do you know what? I start nearly every podcast saying, I'm tired, but usually... Especially when it's a guest like yourself that's coming from overseas. So I've had from Australia, from different parts of the States and Canada. Usually it's because we're, recording at some insane time of the morning or night.
Right.
This is actually quite comfortable for both of us, I think, time-wise.
Yeah, it's not bad.
But it's just been a long day. I'm literally, as you can see, sitting here dressed still from the gym. Just got in, but we've got to talk about Star Wars, so that's the most important thing. But
it'll be a relaxing experience.
Yes, good. That's what I need. That's what I need after the day I've had. So, Star Wars. Now I don't know if you have, or if many of our listeners have, and if they haven't, please don't go back and listen to episode. I want to say episode 3. Yeah, I think so. It was a very special guest. It was my mum. She came on to speak about her all-time favorite thing, that is Star Trek. And we did mention Star Wars during this conversation, so don't worry. But she's also a big Star Wars fan. So
awesome. Again,
I'm having a run of guests talking about topics that I kind of know something about. So this is nice. But I guess, where do we begin? I suppose we'll begin with, where did you begin? I'd like to know what was your first sort of introduction to Star Wars.
We'll begin at the beginning. That way we know where we began. I know that's a quote from something. I can't remember what. But my introduction to Star Wars was pretty young. I remember watching the VHS somewhere at some friend's house as a little kid and not knowing anything about it. And going home telling my dad, hey, what's that movie with the guys in the white armor running around? There's the guy in the black armor. He's kind of funny, and there's like swords made of light. What is this? And my dad going, all right, time to go to the store. And he picked up the special edition VHSs, which is kind of interesting because I didn't, like, that was my first exposure. So when people were going, oh no, they added so much stuff, I was like, that's all I know. But that's really where I started, and I liked it as a kid growing up, but I didn't really take the deep dive off the cliff of Star Wars until maybe about 7 years ago, where I had this resurgence of Star Wars interest, and then I just kind of like took this deep dive because I knew now I could kind of outside things. So the comics, the books, the stories, video games, all that. And that's really where I kind of became the crazy man speaking into the microphone you see before you.
So did you approach them then in the order they were released, or did you see them? Because you said that you saw first one like at a friend's house. So was that the original Star Wars, or was that Jedi or Empire or something you saw?
I
or you don't know?
I remember it being scenes from A New Hope.
Oh, okay.
So I remember that. I don't know if it was the special edition or not, but it was kind of like on in the background. Like we weren't focusing on. So my first real focused experience on Star Wars were the VHS tapes, A New Hope, Empire, and Return. And then at that point, Phantom Menace came out in 99. So I was 8 at the time, and my family was able to take me to see Phantom Menace in theaters. So I saw the prequels in theaters, and then everyone since then in theaters. So I've really, my experience has been release order.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Because this actually, the reason we're speaking today, it goes back to me listening to your podcast and getting annoyed by something former guest of this podcast, Harry, had to say about how in England we didn't grow up knowing about Star Wars, and it wasn't until, I think he said that wasn't even until like The Force Awakens or something that we started to really.
Poor Harry.
And I'm like, I don't remember the first time I saw Star Wars because I was so young. I just I don't have that clear. But what I do know is that I saw them Jedi, Empire, A New Hope.
My co-host John saw it in that order as well.
Yeah, and I think it's because we had like a VHS copy recorded off the TV.
Good, with all the commercials and everything.
of Jedi. I don't know where I saw Empire. I feel like that was at maybe my grandparents'. Perhaps they had, again, recorded off the TV copy of Empire. And I actually had to go and buy a copy of A New Hope because we didn't have that, and I needed to see it. But it meant for me there wasn't that surprise. Oh, by the way, spoilers, everybody, for this big reveal. So Darth Vader is Luke's father.
What?
And I always knew that. Like, there wasn't that reveal because I was like, well, yeah, I know that. I mean, I remember they had that big fight at the end, and then he came back. It's fine. And then you go back, and it's like, in Empire, you see that he doesn't know. And I'm like, oh, he doesn't know. And then New Hope, and I was like, oh, I finally understand who the blue guy is because I've met Ben Kenobi. That's nice. So, yeah, it's
not as shiny.
No, because it is weird when you watch it out of order. You kind of just fill the blanks yourself, and then you go back and watch, and you're like, right, that makes sense. That probably makes more sense than what I thought.
2 and 2 together.
Yeah. So, I guess I'll ask a question. You like that? You said you saw the prequels in theaters. So, how do you feel about them?
So growing up as a kid, that was the right age to see those movies. I really enjoyed the prequels as a kid, and it wasn't until I started, having friends in middle school and high school that the whole the prequels are bad thing started really affecting me personally. And looking back on it, it's one of those things where I was agreeing with them to fit in, and then that sort of effect turned into actual dislike for them. And then I don't think it was really until The Force Awakens was coming out, and I was going back and watching the movies again and going like, well, yeah, these movies have problems, but what was I so against? Like, what was I? Because I remember really liking these as a kid. Why did I let these other people influence my thoughts on, So, yeah, in terms of quality of Star Wars movies, quote unquote, I would still probably them towards the bottom portion of the list, but I still, when I do my marathons, when I have people over that have never seen Star Wars before, I still put those movies on because they're an important part of the story, and yeah, they're not the masterpieces that the original trilogy were, but they're still fun. Like Obi-Wan Kenobi is my favorite character of all time, and that has a lot to do with McGregor, and how he portrayed the character. So there are great things about Bulls that exist. I think we just collectively, as a society, had this sort of weird reaction to them because of how big Star Wars was, and that seeped into my generation of Star Watchers.
Yeah, I think so. I'm a bit older than you, so I would have been a bit older when I went and saw it. But I remember going and seeing it I think I was with my family and my grandparents as well when we went to see The Phantom Menace. And I remember liking that one and being like, yeah, it's okay. And I mean, the kind of one of the biggest criticisms of the film is Jar Jar. And yeah. I remember hearing my grandfather do an impression of him. And I mean, that just, if you know my grandfather, he's a very sort of serious guy, and he's not the one always cracking jokes. So just in a restaurant to suddenly hear him come out with a line from Jar Jar was, so, it won me over. I didn't like the second one so much. I found that to be a bit, controversial opinion for people that do like the prequels. I kind of like them in the order that they came out. I actually like 1, then 2, then 3. I really struggle with the last one, Revenge of the Sith. Yeah. So I don't know why. I just start watching it, and it's just kind of too much at the very beginning, and I'm just like, I'm burnt out. I don't know. But I digress. Because we're going to get through these very standard, boring questions straight away. So, what are your opinions on the new movie?
I very much enjoy them. I liked The Force Awakens because I understood, kind of just as someone who wants to be in film, that in order to bring about the new sort of era of Star Wars, they had to start in the old era. So that's one of the biggest criticisms of Force Awakens, is that it was kind of a retread. But I understood that you needed to retread what we love to introduce these new characters and bring us into the new ideas. I very much enjoyed The Last Jedi. I thought it was clever. I enjoyed what they did with some of the things. I understand why some people don't like it. There are very legitimate reasons for people who do not like The Last Jedi, and I am those, as long as they are not the illegitimate reasons of harassment and all that. And I've written a couple opinion articles on our website, hothtopicspodcast.com, about kind of the toxic fandom thing. But I don't want to bring this whole thing down. But I understand why there are some people who don't like The Last Jedi. I very much enjoyed it. And then Rogue One was fun. It was different. I liked the characters. And Solo was just going back to old school Star Wars. It was a fun action movie. I appreciated that for what it was. So the new era, the Disney era, I'm on board. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of the things you said about them bringing in the new, having to kind of start in a certain way to, yes, retread some ground, but it helps new people. It kind of pleases some of the older fans, and yes, it's that vocal minority that seems to have a problem with it. But I've had interesting experiences with a lot of the new ones. I saw Solo with my wife. She really enjoyed it. I don't know if it was her favorite one, but she just found it to be fun, kind of a fun ride from start to finish. Another friend of mine, Tim, if you're listening, because he's one of the few people that knows me in the real world that actually knows I have a podcast. So, hi, Tim.
Hey, we have a guy named Phil's that exact role as well.
Well, he probably told me the best thing about Rogue One, because he wasn't a kind of big Star Wars guy, and he told me he went to the cinema, he's watching Rogue One, he's really enjoying it, and he really liked all the characters, and he starts thinking like 2/3 of the way through the film, like, I really like these guys. I look forward to seeing kind of what they're going to do next. What's going to be the next movie with them? because he had no idea how this film was going to end and like where it really fit in the kind of the grand scheme of things. And you're like, well, to be honest with you, we've never heard of any of these people in the days after this event, so it's not looking great. I'll be honest with you. So that's been interesting. I quite liked the Force Awakens. One of the last things we did before leaving Italy is I finally found a cinema that played movies in English. So we went and saw that with some American friends before leaving. And the last it's not the Last Jedi. Yeah, it's the Last Jedi. That's the last one. Man, I am losing it. The Last Jedi. I was asked actually on the last episode what I thought of Last Jedi, and my answer was I'm kind of indifferent to it. It's fine. I don't hate it. I don't love it. There are bits of it that I like, bits of it that I could take it or leave it kind of thing. But what I really like about it is and this isn't about Star Wars, but it's about J.J. Abrams in general. I hate his mystery boxes. This is probably about the fourth time I've said it on the podcast, which is not a film podcast. So the fact that I've been able to say it 4 times shows how much I dislike it. I just don't like this idea of, he says this thing about how if you put that mystery box there, everyone is always looking, wondering what's in the box. But I don't think he gives you a mystery. I think he just doesn't give you enough information, which is different from there being a mystery. And you can't even compare, the Darth Vader situation, because nobody left after seeing the first Star Wars film going, I wonder who Luke's dad is. Oh, I wonder who it is. They just left being like, oh, so his dad's dead. That's fine. So then when later you find out, oh no, he's not dead, it's actually Vader, that is like whoa. But there wasn't an expectation. And then you see what happens with this one. There were so many expectations. Didn't really matter what he did because somebody was going to be disappointed. Yep. So I think the best thing you can do is just wipe all those boxes off the table, which is pretty much what he did. And I quite liked that.
Yeah, I like parts of J.J. Abrams's. I think he does a really great job with style, and he's got a good filmmaking ability. I'm pretty much ambivalent to the mystery boxes because I think they work when you give them payoff. But that's one of my biggest issues with J.J. Abrams as a storyteller is that I don't feel like he knows how to end things, which is why I'm a little concerned about Episode 9. And I've said this on my podcast, and I've said this to a couple other people that I talk Star Wars with on a regular basis, is that I think it'll be fine because he'll kind of have the titan that is Lucasfilm and co-writers kind of with him to be like, hey, this needs an ending. But there are a lot of stories that we need closure for in Episode 9, and I hope that he bring about that closure because we can't leave it hanging,
Yeah, it's.
This is supposed to close the Skywalker trilogy or story rather, and it needs to do that. Yeah, well, this will be interesting to see if he manages it, because you're right, he's not very good at sticking the landing. That's sort of his. Because I don't think he's a terrible director. No, he's good. He did the Star Trek movie, right? The review of that, and like that was fine, but there was no mystery in that. That was just a much more kind of standard ABC kind of just hitting all the beats. And I thought it worked really well. And again, that was another example of kind of payoff for people that were big fans in the past. A few little Easter eggs for them, but very accessible to anyone who's coming to it new. So he can do it very well. Right. It's just this sort of incessant need to, you could have left one. I would have been fine with one. Like, okay, who are Rey's parents? Okay, that's fine. We'll find out. But it was like every other character, there was some mystery about them. It's just like, and I can't. And the problem is that you well know Star Wars fans, they're not going to just sit around for 2 years and wait for the answer. Oh no. Yeah. they're gonna speculate. They're gonna podcast about it, and then it's just sort of builds this anticipation up that any payoff is going to be somebody will have either got it because a million answers, one of them's bound to be right, or someone will have come up with such a great answer
that the real answer is disappointing.
Yeah, I agree with that, and in fact, that's one of the reasons why I've taken a step back in my speculation sort of mindset. I had that mindset before going into The Last Jedi, and then after The Last Jedi, I saw what it did to people, and something triggered in me that, like, well, if I go in not knowing anything, and my co-host had a real influence on this too, because he likes to go into stuff not knowing anything, so that if it comes out that it's good, then he'll still enjoy it. But expectations can bring stuff down as well as bring it up. And so I've stayed away from episode 9 spoilers. I've stayed away from any of the news coming out of that. I do a little minor speculation because it's fun. Like, that's what nerds do. We talk about what we like and try to figure out what happens next. But I try to be a little bit more reserved on that these days. Just because it's Star Wars. I'm going to like it when it comes out. That's just the kind of guy I am. Like, something has to bomb really hard for me to hate something. I can find something good in just about any film. Whether it's just like, hey, you know what? That movie been terrible, but the soundtrack was awesome. Like, I'll find something in anything. That's just the way I look at it. But just to not set myself up for more disappointment, staying away from the speculation.
Wise, very wise. Yeah, I guess I'm a bit like you in that sense that I think of myself, if I was a film critic, I think I'd be like, I don't know if you ever saw that episode of The Simpsons where Homer became a food critic and he just likes everything. I think
that's one of the few episodes of The Simpsons I've seen. But yes, I remember that one.
I just feel like that would be me. That I'd just be like, yeah, it was all right. And people go, oh, but the cinematography was terrible. I was like, oh, was it? But it was all right. It was an hour and a half. It was fine. It took my mind to think. The thing I don't like, again, as I've said many times on here, is anything that's like very grounded, very real, very kind of, oh, it's really raw, it's real, it's so bad. And I'm like, oh, I don't want that. I get that every day. I just want fantasy nonsense completely. So, which is why something like Star Wars for me, yes, it's just, it's as soon as I know something's set in space, 90% of the time, I'm pretty sure I'm safe that it's not going to be a very kind of, oh, this is a real look at life. It will just be sort of, it's, and the Marvel movies or the, kind of comic book things like that, anything like that, I'm happy with that. But I would like to know what draws you to Star Wars, because I think there are different things about it for different people. So I'd love to know what it is that personally kind of clicks with you and that you like Star Wars so much.
Well, like I said before, I didn't really take the deep dive into Star Wars until, about 6-7 years ago. And there's it's kind of a downer reason why I'm so into Star Wars, but my mother had brain cancer. Stage 4 glioblastoma, really nasty thing. She is cancer-free now. She is still alive. It is great. She's doing really well. But at the time, when we found out about it, I was looking for something to distract myself from this, terrible thing that's happening. And I don't know what it was. I was just like in a Walmart one day trying to figure something out, and I saw the Blu-ray saga, Star Wars saga, and I just picked it up. I took it home and I watched it. And for me, the themes of Star Wars are really what clicked. Especially because I was watching them in that time. So this overarching, it's a classic story in a space opera twist, but the themes of, hope is always there, even if things aren't going well and times are dark. Even if you're a nobody farm boy, be empowered to make change. The mysticism of the Force was something that always interested me. And just looking at that through this sort of lens of like, hey, you know what? There's actually some good advice and wisdom in these tales. And just the overall epic scale of Star Wars that just lets you kind of escape into a huge new, but also has enough grounding in classic storytelling tropes that you can still take something away from it. Like, all that kind of meshed into this perfect storm of this is what I needed right now so that I could be okay for the rest of my family. Like, this is what I am using to make myself okay so that I can go in and be like, all right, you know what? Mom's going to be fine. I can be positive. I can fight the negativity that is going on. And then when my mom got better, the Star Wars obsession go away. Right. So I was like, all right, I'm in it now. Let's do this.
Yeah, that's I'll be honest with you, not where I was expecting the story to go. So, but we're happy to hear that your mum's okay. But
yeah, she's doing great.
But it's an interesting. I mean, again, like falling back to literally what I just said, escapism. Like, if you're watching something to entertain yourself, it's nice, isn't it, to be completely taken away and not be like, oh, this could be my next door neighbor, or oh, this could be. Exactly. Do you know what I mean? Like, it could be. I don't know your next door neighbor. He might use the Force. I've never met him, but
if he uses the Force, we got to have some discussions.
Yeah, you've got to get him on the podcast. So there's. Well, yeah, I was going to say there's so much Star Wars. I think True. Even for the everyman on the street or woman, there's like a lot of Star Wars. So because there's been pretty much a film every year for the last couple of years.
Yeah. 4 years, 5 years.
And again, it's on cereal boxes, it's on the side of buses, it's it's everywhere. I mean, even I'm thinking things like Duracell batteries were like branded with Star Wars, and so it's like just for your normal kind of. I'm not a big Star Wars fan. There's a lot of Star Wars, but if you're a Star Wars fan, there's a lot of Star Wars because there's comic books and there's novels and there's different TV shows and there's animated TV shows and potentially going to be live action TV shows. Yep. So there's how do you feel about that? Do you feel that there's too much, or do you feel like, oh, this is the best time to be a Star Wars fan, or where do you stand on the saturation of Star Wars?
Well, here's the thing that I love about Star Wars as a whole, and I think why it's so accessible is that you can just be a fan of movies and go into a Star Wars film and enjoy it. And you can watch the films, and even with the anthology films like Solo and Rogue One, they still tie in enough to that main storyline where you can go, you can watch the films, you can get a story that has a beginning and that has an ending, and that can and you can be a Star Wars fan of just that story. And that's why it's so accessible to everyone. With branching out and going into the novels and the comics and the video games, I feel like those are connected enough to that main story that if you are already a fan of them, you will enjoy learning more about this world that you have an interest in. But it's not required. Like, you don't need to go read, the Darth Vader comic that is doing a run right now in order to understand more about Darth Vader's character in the films. You don't need to do that. There's one exception to this thing that happened very recently that I'm a little annoyed at because it kind of breaks my conversation, like it breaks my point, which is I don't know if you've seen Solo yet.
Yep.
But spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen it, Darth Maul appears at the end of that movie.
Right, yeah, okay. So
and to understand why he's there, you do have to watch the Clone Wars TV series. That's like for a property that has been spanning the globe since '78. Like that's having only one instance of that. That's pretty good. So I think that the saturation of Star Wars is really only saturation if you're not interested, and you don't need to do that dive if you don't want to. The average person who goes and watches Star Wars and enjoys it doesn't need to go pick up the novel, doesn't need to go buy Yoda branded grapes at the grocery store. And no, I'm not kidding. That's actually a thing that happened. You can just enjoy it for what it is. Your level of Star Wars immersion is what you choose it to be. And I think that's why the saturation doesn't bother me. I very much enjoy it because that means there's enough Star Wars, and that means that there's stuff for me to talk about on the podcast. Haha.
Yeah, so it's doing half your job for you, really. So that's convenient. So how would you have tackled this this Darth Maul situation then, if you were wanting to include him in the film? I mean, a lot of it depends on whether or not a sequel is going to happen, I suppose, because it would be very easy to explain it away in a sequel.
Right.
But even if you want to kind of know how he's there, it's not even a case of going back and finding an episode of the Clone Wars. It's like a couple of story arcs you're probably going to need to see to understand how he got from what you remember from episode 1, him clearly dying,
being cut in half,
to suddenly, like, a variety of leg choices, followed by a few different career paths, a brother that we didn't know he had. So there's a lot that happened. So what would you just have not included him? Would you have gone with someone else as the kind of shadowy figure behind, or would you have creatively found a way to condense all that information into
Well, if I had to, Darth Maul's presence in that film was definitely put there because there were fans of Star Wars writing this story. Like, you've got the Kasdans, who are, Lawrence Kasdan, who wrote Star Wars as we know it, was a huge contributor to writing the original movies. And his son, who in one of the DVD extras is like, hey, I'm one of the crazy people who watches all the extended, universe stuff. And so definitely he's there because those guys were there. Now, if I were writing it, would I have included him? I don't really know. But I think that how I would have handled him is saved that scene for a sort of like a Marvel-style post-credits bit, so that it gets people asking the question, why is Maul back? And then kind of that, putting it in the story where it wasn't necessary. Like, that didn't need to be where it was. I think doing like a post-credit thing would have worked well. And then my co-host John and I were talking about this on the last episode. Putting like a DVD bonus extra or like a little thing together to throw up on YouTube that explains why Maul is there, that would work too. Because I get what they're doing. They're trying to get people and watch Clone Wars and trying to get more in this extended universe. But it was a little clunky. Would my way work? Yeah, maybe. Who knows? This is why I don't work Lucasfilm. I don't know.
Yeah, it's the only reason. This one reason is why you don't work for Lucasfilm. Yeah, I guess maybe I would have just kept him somehow in the shadow, so you would have seen it and been like, "That's Maul. Got it. Yeah. I know that's Maul." Anyone else would have been like, "Oh, who is this shadowy figure?" And then if you do a sequel, reveal and explain at the same time. It would give enough for big fans to kind of know, because if they know everything. Maybe pan up from the did they pan up from the legs, so you saw the robot legs? I've seen it once in the cinema, so
yeah, you see the robot legs in there. Maybe they could have lingered on those for a bit longer. I don't know.
Yeah, just done something so like a few hints, but not so he didn't need to ignite and swing a light for an angle.
No,
that
was dumb. Like, I love you, Star Wars, but that was unnecessary.
Or maybe you could have, if you needed to show kind of, no, it's definitely him, he's definitely got, could he not have used the Force through, because Vader's done that, right? He's been on like a comm channel and used the Force on someone.
Yeah.
So he could have done something, like pulled her or grabbed her or done something so that you're like, oh, hold on, this ain't a normal guy, he's got the Force. That would have been all right. But it's not my job to rewrite Solo. I'm already too busy.
I would have been fine if they had just stuck with Force grabbing the saber into his hand.
Yeah.
They didn't need to ignite the thing. Like, that was just like that was fan service on a whole other level.
Well, the fans appreciated it, or
oh yeah, don't get me wrong, I still enjoyed it. Like, I was the target audience for that. So.
Oh, wonderful. So, yeah, it's very difficult to speak about Star Wars for less than 7 hours. So
True.
we'll have to get you back on. But normally,
Sure.
what I like to do is hand over to my guests and let them ask me a couple of questions that they might have on their topic. So, any Star Wars related questions that you have for me?
So, how deep have you your fandom? Like, are you just a movie guy? Are you touched a couple comics here and there? Like, what's your madness level here?
So I'm just going to turn the recording off for a second, and then I'll tell you. So I have seen all the films. I've actually been to a couple of like the premieres when they've like not in London or anywhere like that, just locally, like the midnight screenings. For the last couple, by chance and usually by myself. And the last one, as I told on the last episode, I forgot that it was coming out the next day. Kind of got home at 11 o'clock at night, couldn't sleep, and discovered that at 12 o'clock at night, Star Wars was playing. So I just woke my wife up to tell her, do you mind if I shoot off to the cinema? Because I'm going to go and watch Star Wars. I've read quite a number of the comics.
The newer run with Marvel or the Dark Horse stuff?
Both.
Okay, cool.
I'm not so much now, but I was reading a lot of comics at one time. So just reading whatever I could get my hands on, and I read a lot. Played a lot of the different games. I don't know what else. Seen quite a bit of Clone Wars. I've tried a couple of times to be like, I'm going to watch this from season 1 and I'm going to watch it all the way through, and just I can't. I get there's just too many. There's some really good episodes, but then every other episode is kind of, especially at the beginning, there was a lot of what I would call filler episodes that just weren't quite. So probably what I need is like a list of the key episodes, and then I should just go through and watch those ones. But I've seen quite a lot of them. I think I've seen most of Rebels, and so yeah,
So you're pretty deep in there.
And I've listened to a lot of podcasts on it. So yeah, I think like Steel Wars, that I know you're a big fan of, and
yeah.
But to be honest, at the moment, just because a couple of times I had to reset my phone and reinstall like the podcatcher, and then kind of try to remember all the podcasts that I was subscribed to before. So currently, the only Star Wars podcast on my phone is yours. So that's
we did it! Victory!
I don't know how that happened, but yeah, I kind of dropped off after the last film, I suppose, just because it was maybe a bit like you. That I was just like, oh, there's just I don't want to know every single thing, especially immediately after, where it was just reactions after reactions after reactions. I was just like, that's not that entertaining for me. So
yeah, that's one of the things that we try to do a little differently on our podcast. Is like we try to do, we'll do the reaction stuff, but we kind of reserve that for our like side show, like our little 20-minute, 30-minute conversations, as opposed to full episodes. And we'll try to kind of just do something different and random every once in a while for like who. We had the last episode was on the Blu-ray specials for Solo. Like, who does that?
But no, I enjoyed that because I'm like, again, it's like with a lot of things, and it's sort of, this podcast helps that I know a lot about a lot of different things, but I think it's just linked to having a good memory. So kind of seeing things once and remembering nearly everything about it. But it means that I rarely kind of go back to things. So I'm not going to go and buy the Blu-ray of Solo. I enjoyed the film. I'm sure I'll see it again when it's streaming somewhere or on TV or whatever. I'm not going to go and buy the Blu-ray. So I quite appreciated actually knowing what's on the bonus bits, because there's no way I'm going to see them. So that was thanks for that. I enjoyed that. But yeah,
got another question for you here. So it sounds like you mentioned at the beginning your household was both a Star Trek and a Star Wars household.
Yeah.
So how was that growing up as a fan of both and dealing with the sort of tribalism culture that some people have against, one's better than the other?
Yeah, it's a strange thing because so in my family particularly, so my brother quite likes Star Wars. He'll do like the Lego Millennium Falcon or something like that. He's quite into Star Wars, but not. I don't think he goes beyond the films, put it that way.
Sure.
But he's not into Star Trek, not into Doctor Who or anything like that. Star Wars is about as far as he'll go in that direction. He's loves football, soccer for you. He's a sport guy. Very much my dad was like that. My mum, she was the Trekkie, she was the Star Wars fan, Doctor Who, like grew up with all that, and even her parents as well. So we're kind of
That's
generations of those. And I think it's more just sci-fi in general, because I think they watched like everything that was sci-fi. So, you know, you've got your Star Trek, but then they would have watched like Babylon 5. They would have watched especially all the original ones, like Battlestar Galactica, but the old one, and Space 1999 and kind of everything. So I grew up already sort of aware of all of these old shows, and then Star Wars and Star Trek, and sort of followed. And I suppose the difference is that Star Wars, it had been and gone almost. Like, it was there, but it wasn't really, there was never really much new stuff. Like a few games,
Yeah, there was that
stuff
dry
to
period.
read. So Star Trek was just a TV show that you could watch kind of week by week. And Star Wars was a little bit more, let's watch one of the Star Wars films. That would be nice. Or a bit of trivia somewhere. Somebody's asking some questions and you know the answer because, we know everything about Star Wars. So it wasn't really, I didn't have that issue of there being a kind of a battle between the two, but I was very aware of it, but like not really sure why. It's a little bit like the Marvel DC thing. Again,
Right.
I'm a huge comic book fan, but I like both, and I've always liked both, and I like certain I'm probably more a DC fan than a Marvel fan, but I'm as someone who's more a DC fan than a Marvel fan, probably know a lot more about Marvel than someone who says, I'm a big Marvel fan and I don't like DC. So that's kind of my level there.
Gotcha.
So I've never had this kind of one side against the other, if that makes sense. It was fine. And then we went when there was new Star Wars films coming out. We went and saw them. We got the toys. We were there. We were ready. And
Awesome.
whenever there was a new Star Trek, we were there. We were ready. So it's sort of it's been fine. It's been an interesting education.
That's cool. Yeah, and Star Wars is my big thing, but I'm all into all sorts of other sci-fi and fantasy stuff as well. Like, I play, role-playing games of all shapes and sizes, and video games, and read books. And so this is like my prime one, but like everything else, I'm into that too. Now I need to start watching Star Trek just for my education.
I don't know if you can see because I know you can see the top part of my bookshelf. I don't know if you can see the actual books that are on the bookshelf.
Oh yeah, I can see a couple guys there.
It's all Dune, all the prequels to Dune. So I'm just sort of sci-fi in general, to be honest with you. But
it's a great place to be.
But it's like I enjoy like the new Star Trek series that came out, Discovery.
Oh yeah,
really enjoyed that. But again, a lot of Star Trek fans didn't like that. They didn't like what they'd done. I'm just like, hey, it's more of something familiar. Is it different? Yeah, it's a bit different, but it has to be. If they put out the old stuff, nobody would like accept it now, apart from you.
Right.
But you are not going to sustain an ongoing new thing, so they've got to spice it up a bit, do a kind of more modern take on a TV series, but set in a universe with kind of the same rules and principles that you already know. Brilliant. I also really like the Orville. That was, another kind of similar but different, but it's all good. Just enjoy it. I told you, I'm a terrible film critic. Everything's good. It's all nice. It's all wonderful. Don't worry about it. Right.
Yeah, Star Wars is having that problem too, with people wanting just the old stuff, and I think it has to do with we forget the next generation. We forget that there is a group of kids who are going to grow up with Finn and Rey and Poe and Rose as their heroes, just like I grew up with Anakin and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn and Mace Windu, and just like the generation before me was all about Luke and Han and Leia. Like, it's okay to have that legacy connection, but keep the next generation in mind. They're always going to have new heroes, and what better way to introduce them,
Yeah. And I mean, I think they've done well. I mean, they've been very successful.
Yeah,
all
I agree.
all of them. So, and again, it is just, as we said, that very loud minority that make it appear at times that things aren't successful. But I mean, well, everyone was saying, well, not everyone was saying, they were saying, you know, oh, Kathleen Kennedy, she's going to be out. No, her contract's been renewed. So clearly they're doing what they need to do and people are happy. So we've still got a bit of time, if you're all right, if you don't need to shoot off, just to do our questions without context. So I put the call out. I asked for some questions. Didn't get many on Twitter, guys. And I was going on. I was a bit disappointed. I had to go to Facebook, which was a last ditch effort, but it happened. So got a few interesting questions for you here.
All right, let's do it.
So we'll start with regular contributor to the show, Phil Better, from the Phil Better Show. He asks, what is the one fear you have that you want to overcome?
I don't like spiders or insects, or like I'm more okay with insects than spiders, but arachnids, I don't like them, and I just don't enjoy. And I know all the humans. I know they're good. The garden, I know they're necessary part of ecosystem, but if they're in my house, no. But I mean, it's one of those fears that's like, I want to get this over with and out of my life. Like, it's not something that should be affecting me as much as it does.
So my question would be, how did you feel about Darth Maul's spider legs?
I was able to just say those are machines, so we're okay.
Okay.
It's more of the face part.
Yeah,
that's a problem.
All those eyes. So he also asks, Jameson's neat or on the rocks?
I am an on the rocks guy, but I can drink it neat.
Okay.
I usually prefer rocks. I'm more of a Scotch drinker.
Yeah. I'm doing a sort of health challenge at the moment, so I'm coming to the end of 2 weeks. I've not had anything to drink for a while, so I
good on you, man.
Usually probably go neat, just because when I open the freezer I realize we don't have any ice. So
there you go. Neat out of necessity.
Exactly. Superman or Batman?
Oh, I'm a Batman guy.
Welcome.
I like bats. He's cool.
You're allowed to stay. Good. Now he's asked a final question. Oh, I was going to say final question. I didn't see the see more button that I've just clicked. He has so many questions on here. Phil, if you're listening, I'm saving the rest for another guest, because you can't take over the show. I will ask the last one that I read, which I felt was a little bit of a difficult question for me to ask, because he asks a conversation with or getting to know who. So he's
I'm gonna go with a conversation with.
Excellent. Although you say that now, but hopefully you and your co-host may be appearing on an episode of Getting to Know Who. So that answer.
My answer may change.
Very good. Had another interesting question from Eric. I don't know exactly where Eric is from, so I'm just going to say Eric, and I'm not saying your last name just in case. Would you rather fight a bear-sized duck or 10 duck-sized bears? Keep in mind, it's 10 bears, not cubs.
Yeah, so I like bears a lot. They're kind of a cool animal, which means I know what bears can do to people. Even if they're shrunk down, I think bears are going to be more terrifying than fighting a duck. Now, don't get me wrong, a duck is going to be aggressive. A bear-sized duck is going to be one heck of a challenge and could probably kill me too, but I think I'd stand a better chance against the bear-sized duck than the duck-sized bears.
It's a good answer. Rory Spence has told us that the only way to escape a bear is to run downhill, because apparently they can't run down hills. So
see, I want to say that I've heard that before, and I think that might be one of those
tell us
those
it's not true. Oh,
urban myths. I'll have to double check. I don't think that one's as clear as people believe it to be.
Rory, if you're listening, I hope you are. So fact check that for me, please. Okay, we're just switching over to Twitter very quickly. Play D&D pod. So Dante, he asks, what is the best way to train a cat? Now, he's recently bought a cat, so that will explain that question.
I've had cats my whole life. It really depends on what you're trying to train them to do. If you're trying to train them to use the litter box, that's real easy. You lock them in the room with the litter box for probably about 2 days, a day, 2 days, so that they know where it is. And then you just kind of like start doing the gate off sort of procedure where you expand the perimeter of the area they're allowed to be in by a couple rooms at a time, so that they get used to always going back to that litter box. And then after about a week of doing that, they get the hang of it.
Now, Dante, that is a really good answer, so I hope you are happy, because I can't imagine you expected such a professional answer when you typed that question in. Let's see what else he's got. Another few interesting ones. We'll go with this one. If you had a year to do whatever you wanted, what would you spend your time doing?
See, the tricky part of that is that he doesn't say if you had a year and then all the resources you needed. So, but if I had the resources, I would spend that year making short films. Something that I have enjoyed working on recently with groups, and it would be cool to get one of my own personal projects off the ground. So that'd be a lot of fun.
Dante, again, if you're listening, that's an excellent answer, because you came on here to talk about filmmaking and making small films and things. So it's all syncing up very nicely.
Let's get together, do some stuff.
I will ask you his final question, because I've got to know your answer to this. When I think about how good your first two answers were, can't wait to hear this one.
All right.
Right. Why is it that you have fingertips but not toe tips, yet you can tiptoe?
Okay. All right. So, Dante, I want you to hold up your hand, look at it. You'll see that your fingers have 3 joints, right? And they're kind of divided into sections. So that top part is your fingertip, but it's different for your entire fitting context, right? So there's that. Your toes only have big toe joints, but not all of them have joints. I'm not a doctor, so don't take my word on this. And I believe that ballerina in the world who can actually legitimately tiptoe. So I don't know, some sort of professional terminology.
Well, I mean, well done. That was probably a better answer than I could have imagined was going to come out. So
one of your listeners is like a medical professional and going, "This guy's spreading false information about joints and fingers and toes."
And listener, if you are a medical professional and that's the way you feel, please get in contact. Come on the show. We'll be happy to speak to you. I need guests and topics. So brilliant. We can talk about medical stuff. There will be a topic I know nothing about. So that'll be nice.
There you go.
Right. So before we wrap it all up here, Ian, why don't you tell the dear listeners how they can hear more from you, especially if they came here to listen to your topic, Star Wars, because you know a lot about it. You talk about it a lot. Where can people find you?
Well, I am the co-host of a podcast called Hoth Topics. I co-host that with my friend John, and we have guests on occasion to just talk about Star Wars in general and specific topics, and we have a lot of fun doing it. You can find us at hothtopicspodcast.com, and on Twitter, you can find the podcast as a whole at HothPod. You can find me personally at HothPod. Yeah, we're on pretty much wherever you can get your podcasts. If you seriously, if you're listening to this and you look at something and it goes, you're not on there, let us know, because I want to be on there. So, but for the most part, all the ones, iTunes, Google Play, any of the other podcasting apps, you can find us there. Yeah.
Excellent. And yeah, definitely worth a listen if you like Star Wars. Maybe you don't like Star Wars. Maybe they'll convince you to like Star Wars. There is one episode with Harry on. Avoid that one, but all the others are really good. So
poor Harry, he's getting so much flack. Even John was giving him flack too, and I was just like, hey, what he told you was true from a certain point of view.
Yeah. Okay.
He's got a different experience.
Right. Anyway, so if you want to get in touch with me, you can do so on Twitter and Instagram at ACWpod. You can email me at aconversationwithpod@gmail.com. If you want to be on the show, send me an email. All you need is a half-decent microphone and Skype or Discord or any other service, and I'd be happy to have you on as a guest. You can also head across to Getting to Know Who and listen to my other show, because that's a lot more work to put out. So I'd appreciate if people went over and listened to that. There's a lot of episodes on there already, so it's been coming out weekly, which is more work than I imagined it would be, but it's well worth it. If you don't know that it's well worth it because you haven't listened, well, now's your chance. But you will find links to all of these things, the different podcasts, to Ian's podcast, to his Twitter, his Instagram, to anything I'm doing in the show notes. So just head on down there. That'll be the easiest way. Thank you all for listening, and thank you, Ian, for calling in so we could have this very interesting conversation about Star Wars. And
thank you very much. Had a great time. We'll have to have you on our show sometime.
Well, you heard that, everybody. That's a verbal contract right there. So
yeah, and we've kept our word on other guests, so it'll happen.
Oh well, so if you weren't planning on checking it out, if you're like, I'm not sure, well, now there's an extra reason to. Just not because you want to hear me, but just to see if they really are keeping their word. They're not actually going to listen to the episode. They just look in the description and be like, oh, there he is. Okay, we believe you.
Viral marketing at its finest.
Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you, everyone, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye.